Hello and welcome back to the Basic Bible Podcast. This is our final podcast of the year 2022. So thanks for joining us once again. And I don't know, but first off, let me just say at the top here that I am the guest today. It's just me. It's just me and you today for this week, this last podcast of the year. And I don't know about you, but I love those end of the year specials, the top 10 stories of 2022, the top 10 whatever. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're just going to take a few minutes here and go over some of the, just kind of a reflection of the year 2022. And so I thought I'd start off with our top 10 list of podcasts this year. So these are the top-rated Basic Bible Podcast episodes of the year 2022. Okay? So are you ready? I hope so, because we're going to hit it right now. So starting at number 10, Seeing the Savior, episode 196. Episode 196, Seeing the Savior. That is a book, a devotional book by our friend Aaron White, who I'm pretty sure this guy writes like a book a week or something. He writes more books than most people actually read. But he's a good friend, even though I give him a lot of grief. He's a good friend, and he, not just being a prolific writer, but a good writer and a decent writer. So that was his devotional work. So that was number 10. Number 9, episode 221, When Men Have Miscarriages, by, I'd call him a new friend, and that's Dave Dietz. And so, Dave Dietz, if you're out there, you're number 9. So people wanted to hear about, and again, it's the title is almost misleading because it's not talking about transgenderism or anything, but he is talking about miscarriages from the father's perspective and the grief that men go through. And so that was a pretty needed book. So that's number 9. Number 8, Abuse in the Church, by a report by the Southern Baptist Convention, which, oh man, I am still in shock about. But Jennifer Greenberg, she's an author as well, and just an expert. Well, I don't know if I'd call her an expert, but she faced abuse when she was a child and has written about it. She's got a pretty prolific Twitter page, and I believe she's also writing another book. So we're going to have Jennifer back on the podcast pretty soon, actually. We have been in the talks, but that was all about the Southern Baptist abuse scandal. And then coming in at number 7, I Know God, But Do I Know God, by a great new author, a fellow Pensacola Christian College graduate. And then coming in at number 6, Recovering Fundamentalism, by Nathan Cravat. He was our guest. If you've ever listened to the Recovering Fundamentalist podcast, you know who Nathan is. And so we chatted a little bit about our shared history of coming out of fundamentalism and what that looks like. And then number 5, Focus on Christ. That was, I think it was actually the first episode. That's, let's see, episode 195. I believe that was the first episode of 2020 with our friend, 2022, our friend Daniel Leach, who I'm actually meeting tomorrow. We're going to be recording another podcast tomorrow. And so that was a kind of a mini devotional that Daniel gave us. Coming in at number 4, episode 208, the first of a series we did, Things Not to Say to Your Pastor. Ray Jewell and I did that podcast together, and we went through a list of sayings that I had collected online from pastors I know, real pastors, who really had these things said to them. So, man, check that out, because if you saw, or if you some of those things, you heard some of those things, man, you'd be shaking your head. All right, number 4, Number 4 on our list is, let's see. I think I miscounted here. No, sorry. Oh, no, here it is. Sorry. I'm reading my own handwriting terribly. Number 3, episode 205, The Donkey Factor. The Donkey Factor with Kevin Horath, who's a pastor down in Illinois. And it was good to get to know him a little bit this year. He actually came up here to Beloit and did our spiritual emphasis week here at Rock County Christian School. And I count him as a friend now. He sent me his books, and The Donkey Factor was not only an adult book, but a children's book that he has written. And you want to check that out. My kids love the children's book. So shout out to another Kevin out there. And coming in, that was number 3. So coming in at number 2, episode 199, The Illustrated Baptist Catechism. The Illustrated Baptist Catechism. And that really was a cool book that I've used with my kids, and I hope that you used yours. From the fine folks over there at RefTunes here in Janesville, Wisconsin. And that leaves us with number 1. The number 1 podcast of 2022. The number 1 basic Bible podcast was a tie. Back to Kevin Horath, episode 206, The Role of Assistant Pastor, and episode 207, The Forgotten Preface, which is a great book on the King James only controversy, dealing with the preface of the King James Bible, which was written by the translators, which a lot of people haven't read. And a lot of King James only people would be scratching their heads at if they took the time to actually read it. So that's our top 10 list of 2022. But oh no, we're not done yet. We have 2 more top 10 lists to go through, even though my throat is a little sore right now for some reason. I haven't done this amount of talking in a while. But I want to go through top 10, which I think are news stories related to the Basic Bible Podcast in 2022. I keep saying 2020. 2022 top news related or news items related to the Basic Bible Podcast. And I didn't actually put these in a particular order. So I'm just going to say number 10. I got to meet a billionaire this year. That's pretty cool. I got to meet Diane Hendricks, who is the owner of ABC Supply Company and various other things. Done a great job here in Beloit. A conservative activist and active politically. But I got to meet Diane Hendricks. That was pretty cool. I don't get to meet and chat with a billionaire every day, so that was pretty cool. Number 9, Ray Jewell starts working at Chick-fil-A. Ray is doing a better job than any ministry he's ever done there at Chick-fil-A, serving people the Lord's chicken. What could be more spiritual than that? All right, that's number 9. Number 8, I bought a whole bunch of new podcast equipment, and I still don't know how to use it, and a lot of it's just pure junk. So Kevin gets ripped off is number 8. That's me. Number 7, Cessationist. The new Cessationist, the new documentary from Les Lanphier from the Report Pub is doing, and we are a sponsor that the Basic Bible Podcast has sponsored that. We gave some money to support that, so when that comes out, which I believe will be next year in 2023, we're going to get a credit, and that'll be awesome. I'm looking forward to reading it. Good night. To seeing it. So, that was, let's see, number 7, I believe. So, I didn't number these. 10, 9, 8, 7. So, this number 6, I put the Southern Baptist abuse scandal. And I am still in shock. And I think we have only uncovered the tip of the iceberg when it comes to abuse in the church. And I'm tired of hearing people talk about Disney or public school teachers are just groomers. Well, come to find out, your child is in more danger in a Southern Baptist church than they are at Disney World, or they are in a public school. it's something we have to deal with. We have to call out sin, even in our own camps. That's number 6, the Southern Baptist abuse scandal. Number 5, the midterm elections. The midterm elections were a big deal. We are all expecting this big red wave to come. As it turns out, it didn't happen. And I was disappointed in that. I think some of you were. But that's the problem when you have Donald Trump calling out our candidates. Who gets to decide who our candidates are? And guess what, guys? Outside of the Trump cult, there's not a lot of people that like Trump, and that shine is wearing off, I think, finally, in the GOP. All right. That's number 5. Number 4, Ray starts the book of Matthew. So if you're following along on our Facebook group, Ray has started his new devotional series each day out of the book of Matthew. So check that out on our Facebook group. That was number 4. Number 3, Phil Allen, a longtime guest on the podcast, left the pastorate. He's no longer at Daystar Community or Faith Community Church, State Line, or Daystar. He is now doing another work, another ministry. He's up in north of here, still in Wisconsin, doing some hospice care work. And we still keep in touch. He's a great guy. But that's something that was big to me anyway. Phil's been a very good friend of mine. And even though I don't normally say positive things about Phil and I, our love language is sarcasm. And he gets that. So anyway, that's number 3. Number 2, I have a tie. I had 2 different surgeries this year, and so my health problems continue. But also, I think the bigger news, Ray Jewell becomes a pastor. Ray Jewell is now the pastor at the Afton Community Church here in Wisconsin, and he's doing a great job. I've been able to preach for him once, and I've been able to sit in on one of his sermons, and so we're really appreciative of Ray. Wow, our co-host Ray Jewell. And then number 1, I gotta say the Dobbs decision. Roe v. Wade is overturned, and I am overjoyed. Children will be saved because of this. Now, this has created a huge backlash, and it's probably what stopped that red wave from happening. But if children are alive because of it, I'm willing to take the backlash. All right. So that's our top 10 news-related stories. And then one more top 10 list, if you're still listening, if you're still on board here. These are personally my favorite podcasts of 2022. Top 10 podcasts that are not the Basic Bible Podcast, okay? So these are the ones I enjoy the most. So number 10, Recovering Fundamentalist Podcast. I have been a fan since day one. Actually, I don't think I was listening to day one. But early on, listening, and still enjoy these guys chatting. And hopefully we'll get some more. We had Nathan Cravat on the podcast. Hopefully we'll get some other guys, JC and some others. But number 10, Recovering Fundamentalist Podcast. Number 9, the Chuck Toddcast. Yeah, I have to admit, I like Chuck Todd from NBC, from Meet the Press. I was hoping to get to meet him this year at a debate that I thought he was hosting in Milwaukee, but turns out he didn't. That was a letdown. The debate was still pretty cool, though. Gubernatorial debate here in Wisconsin. But Chuck Toddcast, if you want to be informed, Chuck Toddcast. Chuck Todd is a nerd. He's also somewhat liberal. But hey, we got to listen to the other side. So that's number 9. Number 8, the Holy Post Podcast with Phil Vischer. Yes, Bob the Tomato from the VeggieTales. I love when he has his French Fry Friday or David French. But Phil keeps things interesting. I think he's a little to the left of me, but makes you think. I know some people hate that podcast, but I'm still listening. Sky Katani, I hope we'll get on this podcast sometime. So, number 7, the Alpha and Omega Ministries podcast, A Dividing Line, with Dr. James R. White. Dr. White does tend to get a little Oh, when it gets political, I don't like it because he gets more doomsday scenario, conspiracy theory almost type. But when it comes to theology, Dr. White is still straight ahead, going great. And so I still like to listen to that. Number 6, Doctrine and Devotion. Doctrine and Devotion. We've had both Jimmy Fowler and Joe Thorne on our podcast before, as I've gone to a couple of their conferences. But Joe and Jimmy, Jofo, keep up the great work. That's number 6. Number 5, the Reformatory Podcast. Josh Loftus, keep up the great work. Josh has been on our podcast twice now. We appreciate them. And then coming in at number 4, the Happy Rant. We've had all 3 on our podcast before. Ted Cluck, Barnabas Piper, and Ronnie Martin. They like to keep things interesting. And their book came out this year, which I was able to purchase. Number 3, we have Cluck. Cluck, last year was my favorite podcast when it came out. This year it has dropped to number 3. Sorry, Josh. Josh and Ted. So the Cluck podcast at Cluck's doesn't suck. If you've listened to the podcast, you'll know. But it's Josh Loftus and Ted Cluck, again, 2 guys who've been on this podcast, and they like to keep things interesting. Number 2 is Crying in My Car, a podcast for teachers with comedian Devin Siebold. This is not Christian in any way, by the way, but Devin used to be a teacher and now a full-time comedian, and he gets what it's like to be a teacher, so I download every podcast there. That's number 2. And number 1, another secular podcast, but American History Tellers with Lindsey Graham. No, not Senator Lindsey Graham, but Lindsey has just a really interesting way of communicating history, talking about history, and right now he's going through a series about presidential assassinations, which has just been completely fascinating to me. All right, well, that's all of my top 10 lists for this year. So I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Come back next week. We're going to kick things off right. First podcast of the year next year. And my voice is kind of giving out, so I better shut up now. So don't forget to check us out on Instagram and Twitter at Basic Bible Cast. And then look for us on Facebook. Just search for us, Basic Bible Podcast. You can join our Facebook group. You see Ray's rantings on the book of Matthew right now, the various memes I post, and lots of other stuff. So join us there. So until next year, have a great rest of your year.